Hey guys, thanks for joining us again today. I'm Rob at RS, and tonight I'm going to be speaking to one of the most knowledgeable people on the subject of Star Wars that I know. And I do know quite a few people who know a lot about Star Wars. And Jez is up there, if not at the pinnacle. So please get comfortable, because we're going to have a chat with Jez Hill from StarWarsHelmets.com. Thanks for joining us, Jez. And you are the curator of StarWarsHelmets.com. Website that's been going as long as I can remember, and a website that is often used for reference and for all the factual information that is held within it. So thanks for joining us today. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the website?
Yeah, can do.
What was the original idea behind starting it? And
yeah, I suppose if you go back to the beginning, I went to see Star Wars in the cinema here in early 2008. What do you think was that? What was that? 1978. It really opened here. I know it opened in London in December 1977, but over here it didn't open till January 78. I think January, February. So I went to see it there, and then went back to see it another sort of dozen times because I was just so completely absorbed by it. Loved it, and really since then I've really enjoyed the films, or at least the original trilogy. I just thought were absolutely fantastic. But then when I had kids, the kids enjoyed the prequel, so that was kind of nice. So I kind of went along for the ride then. And then it was about, I think, 2002, 2003, I just kind of got into it. I think we'd been to Disney World in Florida, and they used to have the Star Wars weekends. And I saw all these stormtroopers walking about, and they were selling the Don Post helmets in the Star Wars shop in, what was it called then? MGM Studios, Disney MGM Studios. So, I bought a couple and then just thought, these are really good. And then it because of the stormtrooper thing, I thought, well, I'll join the UK Garrison, because that must be a bit of a loss. So I joined them and came along with bought a set of armour, which in those days was, do you remember the old GT, the bobbleheads? Everybody had these big heads because that's all you could get at the time.
Yeah. I remember the old FX armour.
That's the one. It's either called the FX or GT. That's right. And it was, I think it was a Fulano
big Frankenstein. Yeah, the big Frankenstein helmet.
It was. That basically somebody had made, I think it was Fulano actually made an idea of what he thought it looked like, and that's what came out the other side of it. But and it was everybody in the world around the 501st had it, but it was just very inaccurate. So I bought that, and I bought a couple of other things, including one of the 20th century Vader helmets, the ones from Empire that had all the apple tab on the forehead, the damaged one. So, and I just thought, well, I need something like a MySpace page to stick this on. So that's pretty much how it started. So I stuck a few things on, and then added a few more bits to it. And then it's kind of one of those things that the more things you put on, the more people look at it and go, oh, I've got this. Do you want me to put that on? So then I thought, well, this needs a proper site. And there wasn't anything around then. There was a lot of information on places like the RPF and Rebel Scum, but it was kind of all disjointed. And I just thought, well, I'll do it and I'll start it, because I really enjoyed the hobby anyway. So I was just ending up collecting more and more. And I put all the stuff that I had on, and then I reached out to a number of companies that were around then and said, well, send us this, can you send us that? Just lend it to us, then we'll review it and we'll send it back, kind of thing. And it sort of grew and grew. And I think the time it really changed was about 2004, 2005, when Christie's was selling the John Mollo Empire Strikes Back Stormtrooper helmet. It'd also been in A New Hope. And I saw that, and I contacted Christie's and said, hi, I'm Jez from Star Wars Helmets, and they must be thinking, oh, God. Can I come down and have a look at it? So they said, yeah, come down. But I went down to see it and provided them with some additional information on it that they probably weren't aware of. But from my perspective, it was just brilliant because, it's great handling replicas and all of that. But when you've actually got the real thing in your hands, you learn so much more about it, about how they were made. I mean, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened and the auction went up. And I think they gave me a credit in there to say, thanks to Jez for doing da-da-da, which was nice. But then when the next thing came up, the first thing they did was contact me and say, well, can you come down and have a look at these? And there were 2 Stormtrooper helmets and 2 X-Wing helmets. So the 2 Stormtroopers were the move along and stop that ship, which was just amazing, but obviously missing the ears. And then there were 2 X-Wing helmets, which were the ones with the blue insignia on, but they were fantastic.
The stunt ones, like the background.
Yeah, that's right.
Background
but
ones.
At least one of them, if not both, were screen used. And so I put them initially on the website, but there was even then there were a number of people who were contributing towards it, and one of them was Art. You remember Art Andrews? I think he's still involved. Yeah.
He's at the prop store now.
Is he?
Mm-hmm.
Oh right. Well, he got in touch, and I said to him and I said, look, what do you think about these? And he did some work on it. I did some work on it, and between us and a couple of other people, we were able to identify which ones they were, and the X-Wing, etc., and the stop that ship, move along. So that was really good. So in sending that information back to Christie's, that really helped the auction. So then it's not like we got paid for it or anything, but it was kind of useful for the website because it then meant I was able to get more access to it and other things. So I was able to take loads of photos and all of that. And then when other things came up, the first thing that they would do is contact me to say come and have a look at it. And sometimes there was some great stuff, and sometimes there was some utter garbage where you had to say to them, look, I know the owner's telling you that's original, but I can tell you right now it isn't.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you get much of that?
Well, I get loads of it myself. The most common story I get is my auntie worked for George Lucas or worked for Fox or worked at Elstree, and when she retired, they gave her this helmet. And it's literally one of those Dom Post cheap, $50 ones that I don't even think they make anymore because they were just so awful. They're like a big blob of vinyl. And you're just thinking, either you've made this story up or your auntie wasn't well liked because it was just, And so that's the most common one. And literally I get that email probably once. I still get once a year, but there was a period where you just kept getting it. Oh, so-and-so used to work for it, and they've sent us this, and we think it's original because it's got 20th Century Fox scrawled on the bottom of it.
Yeah.
To which immediate response is, well, it isn't, and film props don't have, things scrawled on the bottom of them. Certainly not when they're made out of latex, anyway. Vinyl, rather. So that kind of kicked off. I think slightly prior to that, there was a lovely chap in London called Don who had an original TIE Fighter helmet. So he came up with it to see me to say, what do you think about it? And that was really good because it allowed me to get my hands on the TIE Fighter helmet, which is always my favourite helmet anyway. I love the TIE Fighter. I did a certain amount of work on it, went down to London to talk to Andrew Ainsworth, and obviously he was able to verify that it was one of the ones that he made, so the thumbprint in the forehead. So it was, it was quite an interesting thing, and those kind of things have happened occasionally, and I think that's the thing I like about it. But as far as why I did it, I think I wanted that idea of sharing loads of information about everything and just having as many pictures as we possibly could of all of these things. Because prior to that, I think people used to hoard information. And I do think there was a bit of a snobbery around information. It's almost like some people like to keep information close to them about things. It's almost like I know something that you don't kind of thing. And I I think the thing that frustrated me. So what I've always tried to do is put as much as possible on the site about the details of the originals, etc. Although tend to not do too much on the insides of the helmet, only because then, and certainly now, there is a concern that people will try and create forgeries that are so accurate it will make people's life very difficult.
It would be tough, though. Would be tough to make a forgery.
I think it would, but it'd be a lot easier than it would have done. It would have been 10 years ago. I mean, if you think about it, it's a Stormtrooper stunt helmet. If you can make one out of, get that HDPE, paint it, weather it. The thing, I think there's a number of hurdles that people are starting to get over. I think the one thing that will always hold them back is provenance, in that now, and probably before as well, but more so now, when you try and sell a helmet of that value as it is now, because again, looking back, what was 15,000 in 2004 is now 500,000. If you look at a number of Stormtrooper and TIE helmets that have sold recently.
One just sold recently, didn't it? What did that go for? 600?
550, I think it was. But that was one of the
pounds.
Heroes.
That's pounds, isn't it?
Pounds, though, yeah. And that was it. I think that excluded the buyer premium as well. So the buyer would have paid an extra 100 grand on top, something like that. Might be wrong, but it was a figure like that. And I think there was another one not that long ago as well. So the value of them has just skyrocketed, and therefore you've got, I'm sure, an incentive for people to, create something which is looking almost exactly like an original to try and pass it off as one. But provenance is the one thing that tends to get in the way, because as soon as you try and sell an item of that value, everybody understandably wants to know, where did you get it from? Why have you got it? And then they want to be able to research that. So if somebody came to me and said, if one of the auction houses came to me and said, we've got somebody who said who's got an original, I don't know, TIE Fighter helmet or something, there's usually bits of information that you can get from them that you can check up to find whether their story makes sense or not. And the reality is, the vast majority of the stuff that we've seen, I think since 2004, etc., has come straight from the back of Elstree. And I don't know if people are aware of this, but the reason for it was that Elstree Studios had to close down a good quarter of their studio space back in the late 1980s, I think it was, because the British film industry took a real dive then in the late 1980s. And so they had to close it down because they'd sold the space to Tesco, a big supermarket chain. So they were literally just dumping everything. So all the stores where there were a load of Star Wars stuff, Indiana Jones stuff, all the stuff they'd made in the studios was just going out the back door, and nobody really gave a monkeys about it. I mean, the amount of times there have been stories that, I genuinely think would real stories where people have gone along and they've said, well, if you want something, go and take it, because this whole area is going to be completely trashed. And as far as I'm aware, Elstree told Lucasfilm, look, you're going to have some stuff here. You'll have to send some people over to tell us what you want, because otherwise we'll trash it. And I suppose in the late 80s, Lucasfilm's attitude was that they probably weren't bothered about it.
So a lot of the missing items were probably lost in that.
Yeah, I think a lot were trashed. Yeah, but then a lot of them were just taken from the studio, and nobody batted an eyelid because they weren't going to be used again. And I think just stayed in people's attics in the Elstree, Boreham Wood area until, press got out sort of from the early 2000s of the potential value, and then they tend to emerge. And I think the interesting thing about the hobby back then was that we were seeing new stuff being made for sale on a fairly regular basis. Whereas I think now it's extremely rare to see something, that we're not aware of. Although there was in the States that hero suit. No, was it in Germany? There was a hero stormtrooper suit.
No, it was in the US.
Was it?
Yeah. That just sold recently, didn't it?
Yeah, how much did that one go for?
I don't think it was that much more, if more, than the tie helmet.
Really?
Yeah.
And yet it contained one of only 6 hero helmets.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. I think somebody picked up a bargain there, to be honest.
Yeah. The X-Wing model was in the same auction, wasn't it? And that went for the big money.
That went for the big... Did that go for $3 million?
Something like that, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I can't remember what I paid for it now, but it was worth it.
I just forget I buy them and just stick them in the corner, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, apparently that hero TK had been kept in a bin bag for all these years.
Yeah, well, that's the story. I mean, the TIE Fighter helmet was stuck in a bin bag. The AT-AT helmet was in a bin. Most of them were, because it was just like, what's this piece of junk? Kids were running around the garden. There was that Stormtrooper helmet that was brilliant, stunned, that some asshole had stuck a Star Wars, patch on the back.
Yeah.
And glued it with the strongest glue known to mankind. It really was. It would survive the apocalypse. But yeah, so that was the thing. So nobody really saw the value then. And so, I mean, the suit, your suit,
well,
that
Simon's.
was the same thing. Simon's, but you know what I mean? That one, was it a picture of, was that the picture I saw of, there were 2 suits? Or was that another one? There was one where two young guys just dressing up in the front room with them.
All right, that must be another one. There are photos of Simon wearing the suit.
Yeah,
when he was a lot younger.
So so these things do happen, and I don't suppose then that people really appreciated the value of them. But we've kind of gotten to the price of originals, and the market just seems to be going mad. And there are a number of films now that seem to be. I mean, you've got obviously Star Wars; it always has been, but the Harry Potter. It's rare that any props from that come out, but they always go for a big sum when they can, just because Warner Brothers keeps such a tight hold of them. So the ones that do get out are kind of Warners have allowed them to go out. But I mean, a few years back when I was doing something for some work for Bonhams, they sold the Robbie the Robot from, is it Forbidden Planet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that went for $6 million, and that must have been about 6-7 years ago. So that's a hell of a lot of money for what is, for science fiction fans, like myself. So it was a massive, massive, important film. But for a lot of people, it kind of isn't. And yet, even something like that could go for that amount of money. But it was absolutely beautiful. I mean, it was the full Robbie the Robot. It came with the MGM boxes, crates that it was originally shipped in, and to be beautifully renovated. So it was an amazing piece. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of money. I'm happy I've got my replicas though.
So the website's been going for some 20 years then?
Yeah. I ought to be doing something about it, really. I mean, to be honest, I ought to be doing something with the site, but this last year's been a bit hectic because my son's an actor. He came out of drama school during the pandemic, right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I had a nightmare time, couldn't get a job at all. And then just this time last year, got to audition for a popular British TV soap called Emmerdale. And then in January, February, he got the role. So I've been effectively his PA for the last sort of 9 months, but he's moving up to Leeds this week. So he'll have to take that on himself. But it's been good fun. But yeah, with British soaps, I suppose it's like all soaps, you get kind of 3, 4, sometimes 5 scripts a week that you've got to kind of organise and everything else. And then they then send out call sheets against them. So that's my job. It's just the job. You'd normally employ a PA, but they don't pay enough for that. So I've been doing it for them.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be emailing it down to you.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, the thing about it is that I do need to be doing something on Star Wars helmets, because I've not done anything for quite a long time now. So I just need some reviews. But again, I suppose I'm coming back to the point before, and maybe it's just me, but it was so much more exciting 10, 15 years ago when all the new stuff was coming out, whereas now it comes out as a trickle, doesn't it? There's nowhere near as many, certainly as far as the new stuff. One of the things that got me back in those early years is there was so many unknowns. We didn't know how they manufactured half the stuff. We didn't know who did it, why they did it, and why they made certain decisions over materials, and that's one of the things that I think I've been able to show in my site, and places like the RPF have really helped with that as well, because they've been a great ground for information. So I've really liked that. And then the difference is, if you go back to how it was, we talked earlier about the GT bobbleheads. Well, you asked me why Star Wars helmets. I mean, I didn't think about it at the time, but one of the things I kind of like that I've been a part of is the fact that I've been able to stop so many stormtroopers around the world going around in those bobbleheads. That, understandably, although people couldn't afford necessarily to change their whole armour in one go, one of the things we did in the early years, about 2004-05, was say to people, well, change your helmet. You can keep the armour the same because you can kind of get away with that, but for God's sake, just change the helmet. So you started to see more people that had the standard GT armour, the FX armour, but then with decent helmets on top. But now we've got to the stage now where, well, over the last 10 years with you and the work that you guys have done, where you produce fantastically screen accurate stuff that we literally just wasn't possible back then. And I remember when you brought the armour out, and I've got a set of your armour, and it's downstairs in my hallway, and has been since I first got it. And I think I called the article Blurred Lines, because that was the point in my mind when you looked at something and you thought, shit, this is getting really, really accurate now. And that's a positive. And I know you've done it for exactly the right reasons, and I know you can tell the difference, but there'll be a lot of people who won't be able to tell the difference. But I think that's quite fantastic now that ordinary people can go out and get something that is as near as damn it as good as accurate as to an original as you could ever expect. Yeah. So
still
I think
new.
That's one of the things I've really liked about the hobby. We're now at that stage. We're now where we've gone from sort of 80% accuracy is what we probably got in 2000 or something, and now we're kind of at 98, 99 on some of them.
Star Wars helmets is one of the reasons that's been possible.
That's nice.
That's why it was good to talk to you today. Because
Thank you.
It's the first point of reference for everything.
All we've ever been is a vestibule of data and information, and all we've tried to do is just try and get it out to as many people as possible, to without any kind of angle, hopefully, and to kind of stop this attitude that we saw in some quarters where they were trying to hoard information and not reveal information. And our view was that, we want people to have the best stuff they possibly can, and here's how the originals were made, and this is, if you're going to do it, this is how you need to do it. And to be fair, a lot of people out there have been great. I mean, the guys that own the original stuff have, and the auction houses have been brilliant for allowing access to, so at least we can see the original stuff. Because before then, if you remember, but if you go back to the early 2000s, the nightmare job people had of measuring original props. I mean, I always remember, I think you and I talked about it before. Two of the guys in the States managed to get to build themselves a little thing that could measure distances over like a yard away, precise distances, and they used it to measure the Boba Fett helmet that was on display at the MOM exhibition, I think it was.
I think they did the whole costume.
Yeah, and it's kind of, that's the lengths that people had to go to do it. And now, I mean, actually, it's one of the things I don't think I've ever handled an original Boba Fett, but now people have been able to do that and documented the whole thing. And in fact, I'm sure Art Andrews would have done it because he's Boba Fett mad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great that we can produce something now that is so accurate. In fact, haven't you guys done a Boba Fett?
Yeah, I think that's from the one that Andrews photographed and handled and was party to with the moulding of it, I think. And yeah, very hands-on.
Yeah. So I do need to update the site. In fact, I did get earlier this year finally the EFX Legend Edition Scout Trooper helmet landed on the doorstep, so I've taken loads of photographs of that, and I've actually written most of the review. I just need to put it up there, but there just doesn't seem to be as many new exciting things, which is why we need companies like you to produce as much as you possibly can, which is why I'm really excited about some of the stuff you're working on, like the Boosh.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So that's going to be great because I think that's a helmet. I've got a Boosh, which you've seen it. And that was a really great one done by, remind me the name of the people?
Clothiers?
Clothiers.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic.
Ellison. It is.
Yeah. And it's absolutely wonderful. And I did a really big review on it a few years back. But, despite their best intentions, they've had to do it on what they've seen rather than what they've been able to handle. So if we can take that to another level where it's actually, the based on the original, where someone's, got their hands on either the original prop or the castings from it, then that's really what we want. So we can, again, tick another one off the list and say, yeah, we're at 99.9% accuracy on that one as well.
Well, at this point, the auction houses are really helping us with the bits and pieces that they are auctioning. We got the safety moulds, or some moulds that were created from production-made piece for that. And it's nice that things like that are being auctioned, because that gives us half a chance to be able to create something with all the information we've got. And it's not just, even if it's information of a different costume or helmet or prop, we know it was built in the same era, so all the information we can look at something like that and think, how did they do this one? Could they have done something similar with this helmet? So this is where your website really helps. Certainly the likes of us, but I know I will get people referencing it all the time when I'm speaking to them.
Yeah, it's good. Well,
it is really important. So
that's why it's there, and it's great it is, and we've always tried to avoid, I've had a number of people that have really helped, collaborate with it. I've always tried to shun away from having any advertising on it. So it's just it is what it is, but it does need an update. But it's kind of such a huge project, something I need to have a really good think about, because, it was designed, it's exactly the same foundation as it was in 2004, and I don't think there are many websites in the world that would be, that sort of creaking as this one does seem to be.
Yeah, that is part of the charm of it, though. Now, and people know the way around it, so don't change it too much.
No. Yeah.
So the website, as you mentioned, the website introduced you to some of the auction houses, and I know that recently you worked on the John Mollo estate pieces, and you have told me a couple of bits of that. Is there any of that we can talk about tonight?
Yeah, I think we can. The background to that was I first met John in early 2000s, I think it was, and it was following, I think, one of the Christie's auctions. It might have been the one that he where he was selling the helmet. So, I went to see him, and he was absolutely wonderful person. He really was. Lovely, lovely man. And he was just so open with information. So I went to see him about a few things. I probably had a list that long because I wanted to do an interview and ask him loads of questions about stormtroopers and how he did things and how all the costume design, because I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And he was just so open. So, he used to live in a lovely village in Oxfordshire. So went along to see him and his wife, and we had tea in the garden, and he got his art books out. We went through, and I managed to. He was happy for me to go back, a few times. So we went through everything really, it was really useful for me to understand how everything was done from a costume design perspective. He was a genuinely fantastic guy and so talented. I mean, you look at the films that he worked on. He did 2 films for Stanley Kubrick. He did Barry Lyndon, but he also did Napoleon, which was a film that Stanley Kubrick was desperate to make. And I think Steven Spielberg's bought the rights from the Kubrick estate to do something with it. Although, given the film's I think Ridley Scott's just about to release a Napoleon film, that might completely push it back. But he did a huge amount of work on it. So again, it was great to look at the stuff that John Mollo did on that. And then, of course, he worked on Star Wars, A New Hope, and Empire Strikes Back. In between that, he did Alien, which is, again, one of my absolute favourite films. He did Outland. What else did he do? I made a list of them here. He did an event when his last film. He did Sharp's Rifles and Sharp's Eagles, which was a great TV show, a European-based one starring Sean Bean. That was really great. But his last film he did was Event Horizon, which was the Sam Neill one, the horror in space, which was great, and I'd actually seen it. And it was a really, really dark film. And I remember saying to John, I said, I've seen Event Horizon. I said, it's a really scary film. I mean, have you seen it? And he went, no, I've never seen it. Which I thought was hilarious. You would do all that work on a film, you don't actually see it. But that's actually quite common for the industry, I think. But in that particular case, I think he probably didn't want to see it because it was... I mean, have you seen Event Horizon? The last act is just blood everywhere.
It was a while ago, but yeah.
But that's what it was.
Hellraiser in space, I remember.
Yeah, but he was so good at doing that kind of... His background was military history, and certainly the Crimean War. So that was the British Crimean War. So that was his basis, and that's how he got to work with Stanley Kubrick. And then because he'd worked on Barry Lyndon, he was recommended to George Lucas. And there was he told me a really great story about the first time he met George Lucas in the, I think it was the Connaught or something, one of the main hotels in the centre of London. And he said that he asked Lucas, so what are you looking at for the costume design for this film? What's the design going to be based around? And George Lucas said to him, well, it's basically going to be cowboys versus Nazis. And if you think about it, that is pretty much sums it up, because most of the Imperial costumes, apart from the hard stuff, was all just based on, Second World War Nazi uniforms. And so many of the rebels were based on just that kind of farm gear you'd see in any Western. Luke's got a big poncho on. It's that kind of... And Han Solo, it's just straight out of the idea of having a belt drop down there with his pistol in it and the waistcoat and all that kind of stuff. So that stuff was quite simple. But the whole project, I think, was very interesting. And by going through his art book, which also acted as a diary and also as an aid memoir, you could see the processes that he went through, because he did seem to be extremely methodical, because he realised to get this stuff done in the amount of time that he had, which, as you know, I mean, he started work on it sort of, I think, end of January 1976. And what was the date they were sending the stuff out to Tunisia? I think you and I have talked about it. It wasn't that long. Was it May time? I think the shipment had to go.
Yeah, it could have been.
It didn't have very long at all to get so much of the stuff done. And then, because obviously the Tunisia shoots were done first, and they needed a dozen stormtroopers and all the soft gear and the Tuscans, etc. And then obviously they moved back to Elstree to do everything else. I think from June, July time, hottest summer in Britain in, I don't know, since records began, and then we're filming this film. But it was just really interesting to know how he did things and why he did things the way that he did them. But and he was just so helpful because we talked through that. I did a bit on Alien with him, but then on Empire Strikes Back, the big question coming up was people kept saying, and through my site, through the Replica Prop Forum, etc., they were talking about this Type 2 Stormtrooper helmet.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody had any information on it at all. And there were some shots in London of a helmet that looked more like a Return of the Jedi next to Darth Vader, and one that was a standard A New Hope one. And we were going, well, where did that actually come from? So again, I just remember phoning him up and saying, well, I'm in London on so-and-so. Can I come back by your place and just have a little chat about it? And you'd expect him to go, no, piss off, But he was just completely open to it. So I went round and we sat down and we got his diary out and the other bits of information, and worked out that they did spend money for Empire Strikes Back on producing these extra helmets and armour, and they ordered some in. And I think I told you, even listed the volumes that he ordered, but it was so late in the day that I think they're only in one scene, the scene when they were escaping from Cloud City. I think that's the only scene they're in. There's like 2 shots where you can see more than 6 or 7. I think that's all they had left over from A New Hope. But they managed to finish them off after the film and then use them for the promotions for The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, Empire Day.
Empire Day. And the interesting thing about that, from a personal perspective, was I went back earlier. I was such a mad Star Wars fan that when I heard Empire was coming out, I just started barraging 20th Century Fox in Soho Square about it. And in those days, you could kind of talk to people, and there weren't many idiot geeks that would be prepared to phone up. So in the end, I managed to get an invite for the premiere, which was amazing. So I actually went to Empire Day and all of that. I was only obviously very young at the time. I had to go with my older brother, who ironically hated Star Wars, but nobody else was going to take me. So the parents dropped me down there. They went to see they went to the theatre, and we went to the premiere of The Empire Strikes Back. We obviously all black tie and everything as it was then. But so the stormtroopers all arrived, or loads of them did, on the back of a truck for the premiere, and so managed to see them. So it turns out they were the Mark IIs, although some of them did actually appear in the actual movie itself, and one helmet appeared in the carbon freezing scene. But again, that's the kind of bit of anal information that the vast majority of people have no interest in, but you stick it on Star Wars helmets and people go, wow, there was a Type 2.
Well, it sounds like he's very proud of the work he'd done on the movies. Hence being quite pleased to and open to talk about it.
And I think you're right. And as I said, he was such a fabulous, fabulous guy. And it was very, very sad when he died. And I just got a call out the blue from Bonhams to say, would I come down to see them to talk about something, but they wouldn't say what it was. So I went down to see them, and they just said, look, we've been talking with the family. The family would like you to be involved in the auction to appraise everything. So I took a couple of weeks off work and just launched myself into it, because from a personal perspective, obviously the Star Wars stuff was great, and I knew quite a lot about that already, but all the other films he'd done, like Alien and what else we got, He did Gandhi, of course. I mean, he won his second Oscar for Gandhi, and I think to this day, Gandhi is still the scene with the biggest number of extras in it, and that's because they recreated the funeral of Gandhi, and it was Richard Attenborough, who ironically is also from Leicester. He filmed it, and they managed to get so many people who wanted to be there just for the recreation of it. There were about 1 million people in this one scene, and it won Best Picture and won John Mollo his second Oscar for costume design. So an incredibly talented guy to have to do. It's not just the specifics of the costume design, it's the ability to create a machine that can deliver a kind of massive volume of costumes, which you need. And certainly for a film like Gandhi, you definitely would have needed that. So after Gandhi, he did a number of other films that were all kind of in the same area. And I suppose that's the way the industry works. You get known for one thing, in his case, Star Wars, and that leads to a number of sci-fis, and then you do something in another area. He did a film for Clint Eastwood. It was quite fantastic what he did. In the end, I think he did 2 films for Richard Attenborough. So, great man, and it was lovely to be involved and curating everything and getting everything together, and it all went together in the lots. The only sad thing about it was I wish there was more Star Wars stuff in it apart from the books. I wish there were props, but it only had the one prop, which was the Stormtrooper helmet, which had sold a few years previous to that, a couple of years previous to that. There wasn't much of that, but the paper-based stuff was brilliant. And some of it was wonderful. I mean, he did the costume design for the Robert Downey Jr. film about Chaplin, which again was Richard Attenborough. And that was a really great film. And with that, there were the wonderfully hand-tinted drawings of the main characters with the fabric swatches pinned to the side. So that could then go out to the costume makers to say, right, this is what we want, and these are the designs, and these are the swatches. So it's that kind of attention to detail that was there that allowed, to ensure that everything was absolutely bang on.
So when you visited his house, did you actually see his Oscars?
I think there's a picture of me holding both of them.
Yeah.
He had them. I said the first time I met him, I said, look, I know this sounds awful, but I've got to see your Oscars. And he went, oh, okay. We think his wife was Julia, where are the Oscars? And she said, under the stairs. So he totted off and just came back with these 2 Oscars, which weigh a ton. I mean, I tell you, they are very, very heavy. There was a picture of me certainly holding one of them, if not 2, having much darker hair than I do now, because it was about 2005, I think it was, when that was. So, so that was very special. Only time I'll ever get an Oscar. Try to get the credit for it.
I thought his notebooks and stuff would make more at auction. I thought there'd be more interest in them.
Yeah. I suppose it's such a niche, isn't it? That's the thing. I mean, how much did they go for in the end? There was less than $100,000, weren't they? I think one wasn't the Star Wars and the Empire one both about. I think the Empire one was good because it had Alien with it as well. I think. I think it was Alien.
Because his notebooks covered multiple productions, didn't they?
They did, yeah. Because the Star Wars one had Nicholas and Alexandria on it, which was a big budget film about the fall of the Russian family, royal family, in the early 1900s. So that was the beginning of it. Then there was, I think, a bit of Barry Lyndon, and then there was obviously all the Star Wars stuff. So it was a really good book and had everything in it. But you're right. It's when you think of how much a prop would go for, and yet all that detail about some. But I think the whole estate went for certainly over $1 million, I think. but I might be wrong. But it was nice that there was some great stuff in it, but a lot of it went for nothing because, it's like he did things like the Denzel Washington film Cry Freedom about South Africa. There was some really cool stuff in there about the designs and everything else, but, a lot of stuff was just going for a few £100, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It tends to be the props because they're more tangible and you've actually seen them on screen.
John designed a lot of costumes. Is one of John's designs one of your favourites? Or what is your favourite costume design from Star Wars?
I think it's going to be the TIE Fighter. I love that.
Really?
And it's always been... and also the AT-AT, to be fair, because I think the thing about the TIE Fighter is if you go back to when you were a kid back in 1978, as it was, Kenner brought out the range and Palitoy in the UK were the ones who distributed them or produced them over here. And they never... The initial 12 backs didn't include a TIE Fighter. So if you're mad like me, and you just think, well, I want a TIE Fighter, when you had to get a Stormtrooper, so I sprayed a Stormtrooper black, creating probably the world's first Shadow Trooper, actually. But yeah, so I just created the black one because I wanted the nearest you can get to that. And I think it took them a long time before they brought a TIE Fighter pilot out. And it was the same thing with the AT-AT. And again, the funny thing, by the way, in Britain, we always call them AT-ATs. And John called them AT-AT, and people on set apparently did because it's similar to ACAC, which is a type of gun. Whereas I think, is it Americans call them AT-ATs, or is it just me who thinks they're called that?
Yeah,
AT-ATs.
No, I hear him being called that.
Yeah. So of course everybody thought they were white. That was one of the other funny things that came out of one of the reviews. When I got my hands on that original AT-AT helmet. It was the thing that just jumps out at you, that wow moment is it's grey. Because all we've ever had up to that point was it's a white helmet, it's a Stormtrooper and bigger and a tie that's basically in white.
Mm.
So to see it in grey was like, wow, that's a big moment. And they're the kind of things that make you think, yeah, I like that. But going back to your earlier question, yeah, it was always the TIE Fighter. And about that, obviously the majority of it was cobbled together bits from other costumes, but it does seem that the design of having that Stormtrooper faceplate along with the hemispheres of the X-Wing helmet was always the plan from Lucasfilm in the States. I think I've seen a storyboard by Joe Johnston that would have predated all the development work, that you see the front of it, and clearly that was the idea. So I think he's probably down as the designer for that. But then realising that was John Mollow's job. So as part of that original work, he went to the plasterers at Elstree to see if they could do it, and the vac formers, but they couldn't for whatever reason. They didn't have the ability to do the Stormtroopers and that. So it got outsourced to Andrew Ainsworth, and what it just seems like was the original books just went all the way to Ainsworth, who then just produced them, and then they just went back to the costuming department at Elstree to put everything back together again and ship them out. So I've always liked the tie, yeah, and I think it's great. And it's finished nicely because it's quite simplistic, but it's got the back. I think it's got the back plate, doesn't it? It's got the front and back plate, I think, from a Stormtrooper. Just the front one's got flattened off so it can have the chest box on.
Yeah, I think the back's flattened off as well. It's missing, missing the recessed detail.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Over the classic Stormtrooper, even.
Yeah. So
interesting.
And again, it was then just a case of, well, what do you stick underneath it? And if you look at Oxfordshire, where he lived, he was that part of the Midlands, sort of South Midlands, but was always big on motor racing because that's where Silverstone was. And I think it was either there or Peterborough, which isn't, again, all that far, were the guys that made all the pitwear that the crews would have.
Yeah.
So it was quite simple for him to go there and say, right, I want 20 black, 20 orange, whatever they needed for the X-wings and for the ties and everything else. So they were just off-the-shelf items. And then the other things as well, the boots. The boots, he went to one of the big boot companies in London. I forget the name of it now. Lewis Leather. Was it Lewis Leathers? Used to be in London on, in West London. And he basically just went in there and said, right, I need these gloves for the gauntlets, for the biker gauntlets, for the tie and everything else. So everything was where they could buy it off the shelf, they would. If they had to actually make something themselves, they use Birmingham Nathans would do most of the work. Birmingham Nathans, which obviously ended up becoming the Angel costuming store. So you could literally go into Angels and take stuff off the shelf, which might have been used in a film, but nobody kind of put two and two together. And that's why about, 10, 15 years ago, when the Obi-Wan Kenobi outer cape came up for sale, they had to admit that it had been loaned out to hundreds of people as a monk. So people had been going and saying, I want a monk, please, and they would have rented it out for 30 quid a night or something, not knowing that it was the original Obi-Wan Kenobi one, until somebody very smart realised it and said, actually, there's something in the bottom that says, and then, it was worked out. But that's the kind of thing that happened, I think, in the industry, because it wasn't really until the 2000s that the true value of some of these props was realised.
Yeah, well, I think it was just people didn't realise that they were out there and they were obtainable, did they? I think they just thought they were either under lock and key with the studios or lost forever.
It definitely was.
Well, it's definitely a growing market now. Even with more recent productions.
Yeah. We're not going to have to talk about the sequels, are we?
Do you not particularly like the sequels?
I don't. I find they're very difficult to like. I mean, I actually quite enjoyed The Force Awakens, and I know it's incredibly derivative, but I thought it had heart to it. But the next two, I just thought the second one was just trying to do its own thing, and to some extent, sort of undermine so much of what we had grown to expect from Star Wars. And then the third one tried to readdress what the second one put wrong and made a complete mess of it. So I haven't enjoyed them that much. What I have enjoyed massively was Andor. Oh, and I did really enjoy what was the movie that came out?
Rogue One.
Rogue One. Yeah, I couldn't think of the name of it for a second. Rogue One I thought was fantastic. Really enjoyed that.
Captured the feel of the 70s, didn't it? It did completely. And even with the hairdos, I thought, hair and moustaches. Yeah, they look really good. And the fact that, so I thought that was great. But the interesting thing about that was the film was looking like it was going south quite quickly, and they brought Tony Gilroy in to work on it, to act as co-director and writer. And that seemed to really, in the end, produce something which was quite excellent, I thought. Well, I saw Gareth Edwards, the creator, and I didn't have many issues with that at all. No, I don't know what it was. I think maybe it probably wasn't I'm sure it wasn't the director's fault. I think it was a writing fault, and I think it was just all over the place. And that's why when they looked at what they got out of it, and Gareth Edwards had done, I'm sure, an excellent job, it just wasn't enough. And that's why they then took the decision to bring Tony Gilroy in to reshape, I think, the third act. And I think that made a great impact. But then to offer Tony Gilroy two series of a TV show that he could pretty much do with what he wanted, Andor, I think resulted in something which is absolutely fantastic, and I just adore it. And the other stuff, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed The Mandalorian season 1 and 2. I thought 3 kind of got a bit lost in the wayside. I thought Boba Fett started really well and then just went off really quickly when they decided to make, this badass bounty hunter into somebody a bit more gentle and forgiving, which is, I don't know, I mean, it's an odd decision to make. But yes, much of it, I think it's more that I think the movies were, the last 2 of the sequel movies I thought were really weak. I don't know what you thought about them.
Yeah. Weak. Yeah. I'm not keen on much of it, but I think I've come completely to terms with it now. And I was in the shower the other day. And,
shower thoughts.
Yeah, and I had a moment to myself, and I was thinking. I tell you what I was thinking about. I really love 80s movies.
Yeah.
And
you might have hit the nail on the head there.
And I was thinking about a 90s movie. Wasn't so keen on it. And I was thinking, but it's only a few years after. Why am I not? And I think it comes down to your formative years. Yeah. When everything's fresh and new. So, and here's the example that sprang to mind. I know that The Thing was a remake. But I've no interest. I've no interest in the original one, and even if you did watch it, it would look kind of crap.
It was, yeah. Think from another planet.
But John Carpenter's Thing,
genius.
And so I've come to terms with the idea now that these films are not being made for me; they're being made for the people in their formative years, and they've probably never seen anything like it. So the fact that I watch something and I think, that's an idea I've seen before, that's an idea I've seen before.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just for them.
And I feel exactly the same way, that's why I'm not overtly bothered by it. I just don't bother watching it. I think the thing that bothers me a little bit about it is just the fact that they could make better films if they were prepared to put the effort into the writing rather than just churn something out. So if you actually look at, for instance, I think the Harry Potter films maintained a great quality over 6, 7, was it, films?
Yeah.
And that and I think that's to be applauded. In the same way that the early Marvel films leading really up to Endgame were really quite amazing. And you think Disney were making them in the same way that Disney were making Star Wars, but I think the difference was that they put a decent showrunners into the Marvel movies that led up to Endgame, rather than with the Star Wars sequels. It was originally going to be J.J. Abrams, I think, and in the end, he only did the first one, and then he gave the second one away to the guy that did Knives Out, and then somebody took over. Did J.J.
Rian Johnson? He came back to steady the ship.
And it just seems odd because in any other film franchise, you would give somebody the responsibility of being the showrunner who writes the arcs for a trilogy of films. You don't allow each film to live in its own. I mean, you can do that, but in that case, make them separate films. Don't try and produce a trilogy without a single person having responsibility for the way the story will go over the 3. So I think that was the thing. It was just a mess. But like I said, some of the TV shows have been good. I think Mandalorian season 1 and 2 were just fantastic. I mean, 3 wasn't bad, but 1 and 2 were great. And like I said, Andor, I just think was the bee's knees.
Yeah, I appreciate Andor, but that's what I wanted anyway. When they were talking about George doing a TV show, it was around the time of the Battlestar Galactica remake, where that had been reimagined for an older audience, which was basically us because we'd all grown up. So I really like that idea, but I don't think we've had that. Andor's been the nearest thing to that.
Yeah.
Which,
it's kind of grown
from a selfish point of view, that was good. I enjoyed that.
But it's kind of Andor grew up with us, so it's producing something that somebody who saw the original Star Wars movies in the 80s or late 70s and early 80s would appreciate now, rather than, like you said, the sequels aren't intended for us, they're for a different audience. But it must be a concern to Disney that the box office for I think Force Awakens did great numbers, didn't it? But the next two just kind of really dropped. And that must be, Bob Iger came out and said, I think we're killing people with too much Star Wars. And I think he's
I don't think it's too much. I just think it's not the right stuff.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath, but the Marvels has not done particularly well.
No.
So
I wonder what.
Maybe they'll reappraise how they're making things in the future.
Yeah.
We can only hope. And it'll be the winning Oscars again, maybe.
Yeah, nice if it was.
Although, are the Oscars even worth the same as they were back then?
There's quite an interesting thing with Oscars, just so you know, that when you win an Oscar, because I've seen the letter, you get sent a letter before they actually send it to you. On the night, you've got an Oscar, and it's just like a blank one. It's not your actual one. But before you get to take yours home with you, or before it's sent to you, you have to sign an agreement that basically says if you want to sell it at any point, you have to give the Academy first refusal at a price of $10.
Oh, really?
And that's why you almost never see Oscars up in an auction, because the only Oscars that you can sell are ones in, I think, early 1950s, before they put this agreement in place. So Oscars before then can be sold, but since then, no, they can't be. They you have to sell them back to them for $10.
Or just keep them.
Or just keep them.
Forever.
Hand them down. That's right. But it was a good way to stop people selling them, basically.
Mm. Well, I think we've come to the end of our little chat for this evening. Not to say we might not be able to do it again at some point in the future.
Great to. I've really enjoyed it.
But yeah, I've got some other things I would like to speak to you about. So I'll run through them with you at some point. But thanks for your insight and your website.
Thank you.
Which
my pleasure.
is,
I've really enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the last 20 years as well.
Yeah, 20 years. Wow. That was when websites were new.
They were, and you could tell because mine's on the same platform.
Well, you can tell because it'd probably be difficult to get StarWarsHelmets.com as a. If you didn't have it, I'm sure it would have already gone.
Yeah, somebody selling them. I think several people actually. I think Star Wars Helmets, one of them .net was for sale. A company that was selling the stuff basically that Anovos were selling. So they wanted to buy the .com, but I don't think they would have offered much anyway. It's not worth that much, is it? Quite a niche.
Well, I'm glad you didn't, because we would have all missed it. So
it'd be great fun.
Yeah, if you've not checked out the website, do check it out, StarWarsHelmets.com. Amazing reference and a wealth of knowledge in there, brought to you by this very gentleman here, Jez Hill.
Thank you very much.
Until next time, Jez. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, mate. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Rocky.